Greetings and good Friday morning, this 27th of January 2023, still the third decade of the 21st century. If for some reason you are in fact new to my channel, I always open with that statement because I'm always fascinated by what are we currently talking about? What sort of issues are we facing as a country? What sort of things are we dealing with as a global culture? You know, all those various things versus where people predicted us to be in any way, shape, or form. Movies, fiction writers, you name it, right? And I'm always fascinated by here's where we are, here's where people predicted. Some things are better, I suppose. Some things I still can't believe. Still rocking the red on Friday. Remember everyone deployed, Red Friday. I don't think that many service members are currently deployed, let alone deployed to hotspots, but I still honor the tradition. So, speaking of tradition, if you're not familiar with my channel, if you leave a comment, I will read, react, and respond. I'm not currently interested in being monetized. I'm not currently interested in trying to become a social media influencer. I'm really just kind of experimenting to see if different people can actually come together and have discussions about any number of topics, whether it's geeky, nerdy stuff, or, you know, slightly socio-political stuff. So without further ado, one of my loyal viewers that takes the time to respond, Stace Catalan, I've got a couple of responses from you. I'm assuming I rambled on about quite a few things in my last video, so I'm going to try to understand what it is you're saying. I think I'll do a good enough job, but I'm sure you can respond and let me know. No, you bombed. You sucked big time. May God have mercy on your soul. Okay. Speaking of God, I'm an atheist, so I just say the Pledge of Allegiance just without those two words. You know, funny enough. So for those that are trying to play catch up, all right, part of that discussion that took place a few videos ago was how we're starting to get to a point, if we haven't already gotten there altogether, right? So a lot of that is perspective. I would dare say that we've reached a point in society where we are entertaining to a much greater value certain divisive and divergent thoughts, views, and opinions. There's always been dissenting thoughts, views, and opinions, and they may have been minute, to include minute being somewhat of a root word of minor or minority, right? Where, you know, there's always been fringe groups that would always find themselves and, you know, not culminate, but get together and, you know, discuss their ideas and their thoughts, you know, on, you know, any number of issues that may not be considered mainstream. And I feel like we are entertaining an awful lot of issues that are not mainstream. And in doing so, I made the example of the Pledge of Allegiance, where a certain group of people got really, really bent out of shape about the use of the word God. And part of what I was attempting to say was, you know, sometimes it's not about the littlest things, all right? Sometimes it's not about the most minute of details. Now, Stace, and for anybody else watching, basically doesn't have issue with the Pledge of Allegiance, but has an issue with the word God, so avoids using the word God, but still honors the Pledge of Allegiance and potentially honors what it stands for, but just chooses not to use the word God in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. To me, that is a very adult approach. That is a very mature approach. Like, look, I'm part of a greater society. I may not agree with this one little thing, but I understand the overall greater meaning. And I feel like we're at a point right now where that whole concept of maturity and that whole concept of getting through life has been lost on so many people, where, you know, they just live in this world where they have to look for reasons to be offended by something, and then they must create this hill that they have to die on. We used to use the phrase, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. Well, that's what I feel like is happening. Not only are they making mountains out of molehills, but then they plant their flag, and then they feel as though they have to defend with their life this mountain that they've made out of seemingly nothingness. But again, these words are nothing without feedback from anybody, without conversation. And I also understand, depending on the individual, certain concepts may be extremely important to you. And I am not going to be anybody to tell you how to think, feel, or believe. I think that's another problem we've reached in this society, where the expectation is, if you feel a certain way, I too have to feel a certain way. And if I feel a certain way, you too have to feel the exact same way. So I feel like that level of expectation is having a tremendous negative effect on society. And I think the way we sometimes go about expressing ourselves, I mean, I'm putting myself out there in this fashion, all right? I'm not hiding behind anything. But I've had a few people in the past, about a year ago, hide behind their pseudonyms, the proverbial keyboard warriors, and have said some pretty nasty things, of which I'm of the mindset you really shouldn't write checks with your mouth that your skill set and your body can't cash. But I'm trying to be a different person, and that's part of the reason for this channel. That being said, whether it's the internet, whether it's any number of things, we've reached a point where not only do people feel as though you have to believe as them, but they have platforms now to really make these molehills into mountains and fight to the death. And it's produced all these different things like cancel culture and whatnot. And I just think it's excessive, and I think over time it cannibalizes itself. But again, this is nothing without feedback, so I'm always soliciting feedback. And then Stace, you went on to say, I don't know about those at the Capitol that are complaining this way or that. Excuse me. This side of the aisle or that. But I do agree, once definitions within laws are so minute that it may cause freedom to be lashed down, not necessarily stripped, but a more restrictive freedom. Laugh out loud. Trying to remember the video that you're responding to. So I made mention of the fact that whether it's been recent television shows, well, not recent television shows, but television shows or movies. So my wife and I, mostly me, but my wife is now starting to see it, and I keep asking her, please tell me it's not because of me. Tell me you're reaching this on your own and it's not just me. But a lot of modern day content is trying desperately to address certain modern day socio-political issues. I mean, Nathan Fillion, for all intents and purposes, usually treads very, very lightly and doesn't usually address those things in the stuff that he does. However, he's on this new show, The Rookie, and it's good. I mean, and it's very sensitive in the sense that it takes place in LA, which it's about the LA Police Department, which has been under fire for numerous years for numerous things. And the only thing I think that they do a bad job of, in my opinion, is the way that they portray Second Amendment rights and gun owners. But that's about it. Other than that, the one that really stood out is, part of my routine is when I go to the gym, I like to watch YouTube music, but I like watching videos that aren't like the video itself. It's the song, but somebody took the time to put the lyrics. And I was listening to a song by Metal Church off of The Human Factor from the early 90s. And one of the lyrics was, and I'm paraphrasing, because I can't remember the name of the song. I could probably, you know what? Since I have time, and this is not the most overly produced channel in the world, let me see if I could find it. Because I have I'm just going to go to my YouTube music library. Alright, one moment. Let me go to the gym. Let me scroll down. Alright, so Date with Poverty, In Harm's Way, Badlands, Anthem to the Estranged, Fake Healer, The Powers That Be, Flee from Reality. Final Words, Metal Church, The Final Words. That's it. Off of the album Human Factor. And one of the lyrics, again to paraphrase, was, if you complain a little more, what rights that you have left go flying out the door. And it just hit me. Like I've listened to that song I don't know how many times since high school throughout, and I never really paid attention to the content of the lyrics, even if I was singing along. And it just hit me like, if you continuously complain about things you dislike because you have the freedom to do so, if you complain about things you dislike that are only available in a country that is free, then those freedoms will continuously be eroded. And another one of the lyrics in the earlier portion of the song is something to do with your First Amendment rights, but don't burn the flag. To me, that's just not right. And then it goes on to say, if you think you'd be better off in a different country, pack your bags right now. Here's your ticket. It's on me. And this is like early 90s, like 1990, 91. All right. And now we're in 2023. And I was just commenting on how, you know, life imitating art, and whether or not there's any truth to the fact that, you know, if we don't pay attention to the potential consequences of our actions as a society, right, that we could eventually vote our freedoms away, that we can elect more and more people that would strip our freedoms away. And again, we don't have to see eye to eye. I'll put some of my political feelings out there. I have never once liked the Democratic Party once I was old enough and mature enough to wrap my head around the legacy of the Democratic Party. I mean, it's the original political party of the Confederate South. It's the political party of the Confederate South that initiated the Civil War with the attack on Fort Sumter. It's the original political party of the KKK, Jim Crow, segregation. It's the original political party that voted against all voting rights. It's the political party that continues to come up with challenges to the voting system. And I know a lot of people believe in the big switch that took place in the 60s because of a couple of different reasons, and I'll share my thoughts and views on it. John F. Kennedy was not a traditional Democrat, but his dad was. His dad was about as racist as you can get. John F. Kennedy was not. John F. Kennedy was a bit of a renegade as a Democrat, and because of that, the Democratic Party saw his popularity and got behind him, but in order to win him over with legitimate Democrats, they put Lyndon Johnson as his running mate, because Lyndon Johnson was about as Democrat as you can get. I mean, I'm pretty sure in his coffin was his white robe and hood, all right? Some lighter fluid and some matches. Lyndon Johnson was a staunch racist. Well, after Kennedy's assassination, Lyndon Johnson was smart enough to pay attention to what was going on. And essentially what he realized was there was a vast population of untapped voters, blacks. And quite frankly, we also ignore it, but it wasn't just the blacks, or African Americans if you prefer, but it was anybody who was other than white, and women for that matter. So Lyndon Johnson essentially overturned some of these sanctions so that he can increase the voting pool. And he's widely regarded as being quoted for saying, I'll have those N-words voting Democrat for the next 100 years. And we've got less than 40 years, we've got just under 40, about 40 years to go before he'd be proven right. So a lot of people feel as though there was a massive switch. Also, they pinned the switch on a gentleman named Strom Thurmond. So there were about 23 Dixiecrats that were rather upset with Lyndon Johnson. Only one of the 23 flipped party allegiances, and that was Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond flipped and became a Republican. The other thing that people tend to conflate and confuse is, because of the number of children that were raised in the 50s, 60s, and whatnot by black nannies, they began to see their nannies as more human. They began to see them as equals, for that matter, if not superior, because they were raised, and that had a positive effect on the South, and that by itself started to flip the South more and more Republican. The Democrats gained a foothold in the North. I forget his name. I did it in a previous video. I did a whole thing in a previous video. But there was a gentleman that began lobbying with labor unions, poor whites, so he was not exactly, you know, a non-racist himself. But up in the New York area, he began creating favor for the Democratic Party in the North by soliciting and lobbying poor whites in the labor unions against the rich. And essentially it created this idea that the Northern Democratic Party was for the little man. All right? Because the North being industrial, this guy was basically trying to create dissent amongst the ranks, because the North was primarily Republican. So that's how the Democrats got a foothold, was with poor whites or poor laborers. So all that being said, with all of that historical examples and whatnot, I am staunchly against the Democratic Party. And in my perspective, in my point of view, the Democratic Party has always been detrimental. They've always supported things. And the whole purpose for this diatribe was the Democratic Party is the only current political party that continues to try to vote itself or create itself more and more power, more and more authority. You know, increasing the size of the IRS, increasing the size of government agencies. The problem with the government is once you increase its power, once you increase its size, it's almost impossible to decrease. All right, it's almost impossible to take that power away. One of the chief tenets of the Republican Party that I do agree with is they believe in smaller government. All right, they try to hold true to the tenet that these elected officials are civil servants that are supposed to serve us. They are our employees, and some of them try to remember that, but I digress. So the whole point of all of that nonsense was, it's my personal opinion that the Democratic Party is all about listening to its voters and removing freedoms, thus increasing the power of government, pushing us more and more towards a fascist and or communistic state. I'll go one step further. Only the Democratic Party has ever sponsored, approved of, and supported militant groups within its party. Back in the day, it was Antifa. Back in the day, it was KKK. Now it's BLM and Antifa. But we don't have to agree. We can disagree, and we can have dialogue and conversation. One of my really good friends that lives up in the Raleigh area, we don't agree, but we have very civil conversations, and we have, you know, sometimes we have very open discourse, and that's kind of the whole purpose of this channel is, okay, I don't see it your way, but that's fine. You be you. Here's what I think. Here's why I think that. What are your thoughts? And if you do that, I promise that I will respond. And that's kind of the whole point, is in the third decade of the 21st century, it seems like everybody's pushing to divide us. And while I'm just a little person in the middle of nowhere, you know, with a very unpopular channel, I'm attempting through a form of experimentation to see if we can actually come together and have these conversations without it turning into verbal war or conflict or cancellation culture type things. That's really about it. Stace, once again, thank you so much for watching and responding. If anybody else watches this and leaves a comment, I promise I will read, react, and respond to it, and I do appreciate it. Otherwise, I don't care about the likes or the dislikes. I don't care about the subscriptions or the notification bells. I just want to hear from you. And if you do, you're awesome. Till next time.